Right, thanks, Marvin. I think that's a very impressive presentation as well as the demo. It showcased that how actually the API solution can really advance themselves to address all the automation needed in the organization. I'm going to tap on a little bit different from application development perspective, right? And what actually the steps that I recommended the organization for the customer like you to adopt in terms of having your organization embrace the digital transformation. But first of all, let me walk you through a little bit on the history of cloud application, cloud services, as well as the frameworks that over for the last 30, 40 years, right? Indeed, the concept of having the on-premise computing is not something very new. It's what happened around 1970s, where a lot of the organizations already outsourced their EDI's workload into the value-added network, right? And in the 1890s, you see that when the World Wide Web exploded, a lot of the organizations already see the value and the opportunity for them to explore this new channel. In the 1996, right, I think there's some, why a lot of people is getting excited about the Netscape. Right? I think the first one of the very first version of the browser base. It really changing the mindset of having the client-server implementation into the browser-based application, right? And a small group of the people at the technology services, technology executive in the compact computer actually were plotting the future of the internet. And that is where the concept of the cloud computing were born, right? And in the 1999, you see that the first service, Salesforce actually the first software as a service company were launched. And they're giving you totally a little bit different perspective of how the organization doing the business, right? In 2001, I think the first time the people is aware of the new terminologies we call agile software development. I think for some of you may think about the agile is something very new and recently become popular. It's not, right? Indeed, it's already in the market for more than 15 years. But the reason why it didn't become very popular is because of some of the constraints in terms of the infrastructure to catching up with the methodologies, right? I'm going to tap a little bit on that in the subsequent slide. But again, right, in the 2006, another big player in the cloud industry, right? You have the Amazon EC2 actually launched, and they're giving you the first offering of the infrastructure as a service. 1 year after that, you have the iPhone, and then you also have the Netflix, one of the first movie-on-demand services that offer to the consumer as well. So the list is keep going on, right, until 2009. You have the Uber, the first disruptor in the transportation industry. It really define how the business it should be running, right? It giving you the different channels to bridge between the consumer and the provider. And you see that with the 2010, then you have Netflix actually introduced a new terminology again, the cloud native, right? 2011, you have Heroku coming up, published the first article talking about the 12-factor cloud native application. 2013, something big happened. Any of you interested talking about the container? This is the right moment that you need to remember, right? Docker, containerization. It's not really something new, but again, it inherited from the historicals of Linux, right? You have the virtualization, it's coming from the chain root, going to a Solaris zone, you go into a Lexi and LexD, and eventually Docker is giving you totally the new experience managing the Linux container. And it's 1 year after that, 2014, right? Google donate that Kubernetes, which is a container orchestration, to the CNCF, right? At the same time, you'll find that the Spring Boot also coming up with the first debut. And I think the concept of having the fat jar also not new. If some of you been with the Java development, having the fat jar like 10 years ago, it doesn't matter of plug in some of the framework, right? And you build a whole fat jar with all the dependency within. But Spring Boot or the Drop Wizard actually bring it all the framework together in one set of the best practices so that you don't deviate the way that you build your application, package your dependency, and deploy that across the environment. And nowadays, where we are nowadays, everyone is getting excited about the container orchestration, where the Kubernetes become the factors for managing the container deployment. Along the way, you find that on the cloud application, cloud services as well, the framework helping you to develop your application. The terminologies like digital economy, digital transformation, are those actually embraced along, right? And there are technically 4 forces to help you fuel this digital economy. We're talking about the cloud, we're talking about the mobile devices, we're talking about the IoT, and as well, one of the key enablers for all this is open source, right? With the increase of the reliabilities as well as the accessibility of the internet, you find that the organization seeing that going to be the new channel for them to exploit for the new revenue for the organization. But with this new scale, right, you find that the application also need to reach to the next level of scalability. You have the iPhone become a very great platform for you to running your mobile app. But how you can reach to the internet scale with a million users, right? That is where the proprietary, the way that you run the application, you build the application with the proprietary license model is not going to help you anymore. You need to have some sort of the more openness, right, framework and the approach to help you to build your application. And that is where open source is coming to the rescue, right? Everyone can just pick the upstream implementation of the open source, make whatever the changes, enhancement, tailor it to your need, and again, contribute back to the upstream. And that is the right, and proven so far, that you can get the best idea from all the developers over the world. And but last but not least, we're talking about the Internet of Things, right? One of the very interesting study from the Gartner, they're saying that by 2020, you're going to have 26 billion interconnected devices, 215 trillion stable connectivity, and 63 million new connections emerging per second. That is showing you really the huge volume of the data as well as the interaction between the user to the internet or between the user among themselves. And that is where the technologies like big data, the cloud infrastructure have to fit in to help address this kind of need from the IT organization. How about the IT leader? Do they see on this? The answer is yes, right? And one of a very good study from the Gartner as well is talking about the leader who embraced the digital transformation is getting 26% more profit, right? 12% more to make their organization with the higher value in the market, as well as the 9% gaining more revenue with the existing capacity. But let me share with you some other study as well. Right? When being asked in another Gartner study for their customer, 91% of their leaders believe that they have to embrace that digital transformation. But surprisingly, 59% of them admitted that they don't have the capability to execute that within the next 2 years. And the reason why? It's a big question, and the reality is that you need to have some balance between the application as well as the infrastructure to support that. As much as you want to go fast, you want to go to the cloud-native application, release fast the changes to our production, but if you don't really have the good infrastructure to support that, it doesn't go anywhere, right? And that is where I'm going to talk about one of the key elements of having your cloud adoption strategy successful is to have the balance between the application development as well as the infrastructure support. So what actually the Red Hat definition of the cloud-native application? To us, there are 4 different pillars. Your cloud services, cloud-native services have to be API-based, right? It have to be services-based, API-driven, and it have to be run on the agile infrastructure, leveraging on the container technologies, as well as embracing the DevOps best practices, right? These are all have to be interdependent. You can't just rely on 1 or 2, but it's the best to help you to enjoy and benefit the cloud-native application or architecture. You need to have all 4. So if I have to summarize on the point mentioned in the previous slide, right? From the 6 different perspectives, right? From the focus point, the cloud-native application will focus on shorten the time to market. You need to release the product to the market faster, gaining the feedback, making the changes, right? From the development methodologies, cloud-native application will have to rely on more agile methodologies, like Scrum. If some of you, I'm sure that most of the organizations will have the Scrum methodology in place. But to a certain level, we need to discuss further, right? From the team formation perspective, cloud-native application require you to have the DevOps-enabled mentalities. It is very different from the traditional application where you have the isolate team, having the development, you have the design, you have testing, you have the infra op to run that, deploy that into a production and support after that. From delivery life cycle, cloud-native tend to give you the shortened, right, life cycle of the releases. And I'm going to go through some of the customer references later on on this. Next point about the application architecture is going to be loosely coupled. And this is the ideal architecture when you're talking about how to make sure that your services is running independently and scale independently as well. Infrastructure, again, I mentioned in the previous slide, it has to be agile enough to support your cloud-native application architecture. And that is where the container is coming in and fit very well together with the microservices as well as the DevOps best practices. Let me move on to what actually the step that we recommended you in order to adopt this journey. I think first of all, let me run through this statistic, right? The first key point again, I press again on the DevOps, I'm talking about the culture. That is very important, right? You can't change something overnight and using the same methodologies, right? The same mindset, right? You have to have something change, cultural, within your organization. And when being asked, more than half of the customers saying that I already adopted the DevOps within the organization. However, surprisingly, it's not going to be a broad the organization-wide adoption, and they usually only adopt 20% of the DevOps practices to their project or the system. It also means that a lot of the untapped area that we can improve in order to bring in the full benefit of having the DevOps best practices. And if you take a look at that, if you have the DevOps, the change from the culture point of view, you encourage more collaborative channel between the different group of people. Also about encourage doing more experiment with the new technologies. That also increase the innovation within the organization. The next point also very important because this is not being tolerated in the past. But nowadays, you see more and more organizations tolerate the fail. When you do the experimental exercise, right? When you try the new technologies, it's okay to fail, right? But at least you gain something back. Because you keep trying on, you find out what actually the best thing for your organization to adopt. And last but not least is a transparent decision making. By having the transparent decision making across the different group of users within the IT department, you can come up with the optimized processes, right? Streamline the processes, how to break down the barrier between the different group of people, whether from dev, from ops, from infra, from securities, right? From the chain management control. Everyone can put in their idea and make sure that they have one streamlined process address all the concern, right? It's a win-win situation anyway. The next suggestion we want to make to you is about speeding up your existing application. And why is that so? Because organizations, they always have the legacy to manage, right? You can't just come in and asking, Mr. Customer, can you build the whole cloud-native application, the whole system become cloud-native application? The answer, most of the time, is no, right? You have the legacy running on the application server, right? You can't just throw it away. Java EE have been in the industry for like 15, 20 years. And that is still working, right? And how we can help you to improve that part is where the leap and shift methodologies or the approach per se is going to help you to ease the way of having the operation to manually intercept or help to work on the day two operation like previously. So by doing the leap and shift to a container, leverage on the container platform capability, you can ease your day two operation. Another approach to speed up your existing application, especially for those legacy apps having the very serious issue, like for example, performance. One of the approaches is to take count the portion of your services, whether from the monolithic application, expose it to API, and implement it with your framework of choice, whether you want to do it with the Python or Perl or Node.js, right? You expose it to API and leverage on the platform to swing whatever the traffic. Instead of going to an existing application, now you swing the traffic to a new implementation of the same API. And again, slowly surrounding your monolithic, your legacy with all the API. To a certain extent, when you find that the existing implementation can be fully replaced, that is where you start decommission the application, which is the legacy that you don't want anymore, right? And that is the strangulation approach being adopted for the most of the enterprise customer. The third suggestion is about application services. And why is that important, right? I think some of you will ask, I have a cloud-native application, but why is this important? Because your cloud-native application is not the standalone, right? You need to evolve together with the ecosystem on the third-party system or the services around them. And if you're moving fast, but those services are not with you, you will not gain the maximized benefit of having the cloud-native application as well. And that is where it's important to have all the surrounding services to be agile as well. Whether you consume the cache solution, you consume the messaging services, the rule engine, workflow engine, or whatsoever and so far, right? That is where the container also coming up. A container platform is helping you to provide the catalog for all these kind of services and giving you the neutral way to consume that via the service discovery mechanism as well. The fourth suggestion, I'm sure that some of you already embrace this digital transformation. Some of you already try on the new technologies. But the advice to you is that you don't stick on to the existing framework, right? Don't make the existing framework become the showstopper for you to adopt the new technologies. If you are writing your chatbot, any of you try to write your chatbot yourself, chatbot SDK, most likely you'll end up with a Node.js. If any of you try to write some model, AI, ML using TensorFlow, Keras, PyTorch, you may end up using Python, right? And if you want to build a blockchain application, Ethereum, Quorum, right? Anything else? Hyperledger. Ethereum, probably you need to learn something else, like Solidity, right? Hyperledger, most likely you will end up using Go. Golang is potentially the language for you to implement the smart contract. So choose your best technology, choose your best programming language so that it can help you to achieve the goal that you want. The fifth suggestion is also very important, but it's more toward on the infrastructure, right? It's also a very compelling alternative for the shadow IT, unauthorized shadow IT, because you actually, at the infrastructure administrator, you authorize the developer to provision the environment up to their need, right? Of course, you can control whatever the framework, the technologies, the certification of the stack of technologies that you want them to use so that you don't get into the security issue later on. But that is important, right? And having the container at the abstract layer, building up the image, certify the image, sign it up, and let the container platform to provision that for you, giving the developer the power to control the stack of technology and deploy the application as and when they need. The number 6 about the automation of the IT, and I think Marvin already covered this very well in the previous section, right? It's not just about automate your infrastructure. It also automate your day-to-day activity, monitoring, right? Chartback model, all this activity to help you to reduce the manual intervention, human interaction with your operation. That would be the best, right? And again, with having the container, you can control everything via the policy-based implementation. And that should be the way, I think in the previous section, I'm quite impressed with the way that Marvin interact with the LSR, and then they try to fed out whatever the information. And that it should be the way going forward, right, to reduce the IT friction. Number 7, implement your CI and CD pipeline. Automate the build, package, deploy, and promotion across the environment seamlessly, right? And as much as possible, try to streamline that processes. And having the container again, right, it will help you solve the traditional, typical problem with the infra op. In the past, you have to manage a different set of the technologies, whether it's PHP, Python, Java, right? And the process is also very different. Not to say about the mobile application. Your process is also very different, right? But having the container, at least you can standardize the way of the deployment. It can happen across. You don't have to worry about the technologies that the application team using anymore. As long as you give me the container image and the target environment, I can automate the whole process and deploy that seamlessly for you. And that is the benefit of having the CI and CD in play, right? And the last point I want to tap on, I will spend a little bit more time on this slide, because why microservices have been like marketed, right, along with a cloud-native application. But soon after that, you find that manage the microservices in a large scale is not something easy, right? You have to monitor it, the performance of every single microservice. You need to troubleshoot every single one, especially when you have like 10 or 20 replica of your microservices deployed in that production. How are you going to correlate the logging information, right? And not to say about some of the requirement about auto-scaling, scale up and scale down the deployment of the microservices. So it's not something very easy, even though that container platform together with its ecosystem, is giving you capability to manage that. But implementation of the microservices is not as easy as it may seem. And Martin Fowler, I mean, he was the one who first published the microservices definition. After a while, I observed the adoption of the microservices. He came up with a different suggestion, right? Go for monolith first. Why is that so, right? Even though that you want to implement the microservices, but the recommendation is that you start with a monolith implementation so that you can gain the domain of your services. You know what actually the boundary between the services. And to a certain extent, when you start realizing it's going to be hard for me to keep dumping in the code, right? And that is where you need to break down that implementation into the smaller and smaller module. And that is the concept of having the monolith first. But some of you may ask me the question, right? How about the transactional services? right? It is a very typical question because microservices is being well known for the lightweight protocols, right, over the web services, HTTP protocol, so on and so forth. But how about the stateful transaction services? And that is where another concept we're talking about, the mini service. The mini service basically is having the logical group of the similar services deployed in the same processes. In this case, it can be your app server, right? It can be your Java EE app server. And by doing that, you can leverage on the enterprise-ready feature from the Java EE specification. You enjoy the JTA, you enjoy the two-phase commit, right, capability to help you to maintain the statefulness of your services. I will walk you through a little bit of the customer reference who actually been successfully adopted on this methodology. I think the first customer I want to talk about is KeyBank, right? The KeyBank experienced the slowness in their releases of their software. They had the 12 weeks right before adopting on the new approach to increase their agility. From 12 weeks to release one of the software releases. That is something not really acceptable nowadays, right? Especially when you want to roll out more and more features to the market. And by adopting the containers together with the OpenShift, right, implement the whole end-to-end CI and CD pipeline, they reduce, right, the deployment from 12 weeks to 1 week. And the current system is support up to the 20,000 concurrent users at this point in time, right? It's quite an impressive achievement from my point of view. The second customer tried to modernize their existing application. And this customer, Australian Securities Exchange, actually they also experienced the performance problem with the existing legacy Java EE application running on their application server. And what they did is they refactored their app, tried to port it into the Java Enterprise Application Platform, which is another lightweight Java EE application. And I know that you guys, some of you already get familiar with the JBoss EAP, but technically you only have 3 in the market. You have the WebSphere, you have WebLogic, right? You have EAP at this point in time. The other one, consider dead, right? so having the JBoss EAP is the lightweight. You can start up and doing the clustering or all the feature of the Java EE application server in a much lighter way. And by doing that, they're having 60 times faster application being deployed, cluster it, spinning up, and tearing down, right? And that is also solving them the problem of releases as well. Because if you managing your Java EE application with the typical application server, I will not name it, some of my customers is saying that their team have to stay back over the Friday night, over the midnight, so that on the Saturday, they have to start gratefully shut down on the services, on the stateful services, until all of them being shut down, and then they start deploy the new version again. And finger crossed, if it works, okay, you are lucky. If it's not, then again, it's taking you the similar time to redeploy it, because you need to make sure that the state, it doesn't get corrupted, right? You don't screw up the state of your application as well. The third customer is talking about building the new application. And this customer is very specific on having their API strategy go to the market. Someone telling me that having your API is like having your children, right? So the more that you want your children to be developed normally, right, you need to give them the chance to interact with the other children as well. Let them get the feedback, right? And then take the feedback to himself or herself, develop themselves in the more common way, right? If you keep your child together with you, it's not going to help. And that is the reason why I'm sending my kid to the child care or what, right? And I believe the same to you as well. But having your child going out, right, interacting with the others, you find that different kind of feedback is going to flow back to you. And you need to have, similar with the API, you need to have the platform, to have the foundation to help you to make your API become more agile. Get the input, implement the changes, rolling out, right? And the API lifecycle management also have to be in place. You need to have multiple versions, got the retirement policy for each of the version of the API, so that your ecosystem, the partner, the customer, it doesn't get disrupted because of that. And the last but not least is the customer who really want to embrace the digital transformation, but they don't really know where to start. That's the story about the Heritage Bank. They engaged Red Hat because of our expertise in working with the other banking customer, because of our expertise in having the technologies, the strong technology to help them to transform, as well as on the expertise about building the standard streamlined processes within the organization. And that is the engagement we have with Heritage Bank, the Open Innovation Lab. Technically, we have the people on par with their people, one-to-one, and we try to coach them how to do the transformation, right? From the process, from the culture, from the technologies. We all training them, and the engagement, it can start in 3 months in phases, technically. The first one, it can be within the 4 weeks to 8 weeks. And then subsequently, when the people got trained, they would take over slowly the portion of work by Red Hat. And at the end, the goal is that we teach you how to fish, but eventually you will be the one being trained, being equipped with the new skill set to help your organization to transform. So, how Red Hat can help you? This slide is just to summarize on the point that I mentioned previously. We're talking about the 8 steps to help you to embrace the cloud-native application development. We talk about the different initiatives to help you to embrace that, whether it accelerate the software delivery, modernize existing application, build a new architectures, as well as accelerate the business innovation. So the last one I want to call out for the action. If you guys is interested in knowing more, here are the links that you can access to publicly and get to know more about how to help you guys to embrace this digital transformation with the cloud-native application development. That's all for me, and thank you very much for joining me in this section.